High above the blistering Judean desert, on a windswept plateau rising nearly 1,300 feet, stood a fortress that became the stage for one of history's most haunting last stands. Imagine it. 1,000 men, women, and children, exhausted, starving, but unbroken, surrounded by tens of thousands of Rome's most fearsome soldiers. There was no escape. No reinforcements were coming. And yet, rather than surrender, these people made a choice so shocking, so defiant, that it still echoes nearly 2,000 years later. This wasn't just a battle. It was a clash of wills. On one side, the greatest empire the world had ever known. On the other, a desperate band of rebels, fighting not only for survival but for freedom itself. What happened on that mountaintop in 73 CE is a story drenched in tragedy, courage, and unshakable human conviction. It's a story the Romans wanted forgotten, and yet it has survived, etched into history as a symbol of resistance. Tonight, we climb Masada. We'll relive the blood, the fear, and the impossible choice that defined the last days of the Jewish revolt against Rome. And once you hear what happened, you'll never forget it. The story of Masada begins in fire. For years, the Roman Empire had tightened its grip over Judea, ruling with an iron fist. Taxes bled the people dry, soldiers patrolled the streets, and Rome's foreign gods stood as insults to centuries of Jewish tradition. Rebellion simmered until finally, in 66 CE, it erupted into open war. What became known as the Great Jewish Revolt was brutal, bloody, and, for a time, surprisingly successful. Jewish rebels drove Roman forces out of Jerusalem, striking back against one of the most powerful armies in the world. For 4 years, the flames of resistance burned. But Rome never forgets, and Rome never forgives. In 70 CE, the empire struck back with overwhelming force. Jerusalem fell. The great temple, heart of Jewish life, was reduced to rubble. Tens of thousands were slaughtered or sold into slavery. To the Romans, the revolt was crushed. To the Jewish people, it was a wound that would never heal. And yet, not all resistance was gone. Scattered bands of fighters fled the ruins, carrying with them their defiance. One of these groups, known as the Sicarii, daggermen, zealots, took refuge in a place few would dare to assault. A place both natural fortress and symbol of defiance. Masada. What followed was not just a siege. It was a test of wills that would push human endurance to its limits. Over the next hour, we'll dive deep into this story, exploring the rebels' desperate stand, Rome's relentless strategy, and the final decision that has haunted history ever since. By the end, you'll understand why Masada is remembered not just as a ruin in the desert, but as a symbol of freedom, defiance, and sacrifice. So, grab your torch, follow the winding path up the cliffs, and let's step into the fortress where history stood still. Masada was no ordinary fortress. Built decades earlier by King Herod the Great, it was perched atop an isolated plateau in the Judean desert. To climb it was to flirt with death. Sheer cliffs on all sides, scorching sun overhead, and miles of desert stretching endlessly below. For Herod, it was a palace of paranoia. For the rebels, it became salvation. When the Sicarii seized Masada after Jerusalem's fall, they inherited its storehouses. Deep within the walls were vast cisterns carved into the rock, capable of holding millions of gallons of water. Grain silos overflowed with supplies. Herod had prepared this fortress for a long, bitter siege, and now, decades later, his paranoia became the rebels' lifeline. Led by Eleazar ben Yair, the Sicarii numbered about 1,000 men, women, and children. These were not ordinary villagers. They were fighters driven by ideology, refusing to kneel before Rome. Some had already lost families in the destruction of Jerusalem. Others carried daggers, ready to strike not just Romans, but any Jew they deemed a collaborator. From the heights of Masada, they could look down and see their enemy approaching. The desert winds carried with them the dust of marching legions. Rome had come for them. The commander tasked with breaking Masada was Lucius Flavius Silva. He brought with him the 10th Legion, a force of nearly 8,000 battle-hardened soldiers. Alongside them came thousands of slaves and auxiliaries, tasked with building the engines of war. For the Romans, Masada was more than just a military target. It was unfinished business. The Jewish revolt had embarrassed the empire. Jerusalem had cost them dearly, and the Sicarii, still striking fear into villages, raiding caravans, refusing to submit, were a festering wound. Rome wanted an example. When Silva arrived, he would have seen the sheer cliffs rising defiantly. Most commanders might have hesitated, but Rome never backed down from stone walls, no matter how high. Instead, they turned the desert itself into a weapon. The first step: encircle the fortress. The Romans built a massive wall, 7 miles long, around the entire mountain. Camps sprang up like scars across the landscape, each one a reminder that there would be no escape. The rebels could see them clearly from above, red banners flapping in the desert sun. Masada was cut off. The siege had begun. Inside the walls, life continued, if uneasily. For the women and children, every day was filled with uncertainty. They could hear the sounds below: hammers striking stone, the creak of wooden beams, the rhythm of Roman engineering. The fortress became both a sanctuary and a prison. But Eleazar reassured his people. "We are free men upon this rock," he told them. "Better to die free than live as slaves to Rome." His words echoed in the stone halls, binding the community together. The rebels tended gardens in the courtyards, baked bread from stored grain, and drew water from the cisterns. From the outside, it seemed impossible to starve them out. Masada was provisioned, ready, but provisions cannot feed the soul forever. The constant reminder of the Roman legions below was a weight pressing on every heart. Children asked their mothers when the Romans would leave. Wives watched their husbands sharpen blades and wondered if they would ever see peace again. The rebels could hold out for months, maybe years, but the Romans were patient predators, and they were building something terrifying. To assault Masada, Silva needed a way up the cliffs. Scaling the fortress directly was suicide. The defenders could rain down rocks, arrows, and fire on any climber. But Rome had a solution that defied imagination. At the western side of the plateau lay a natural slope, the so-called snake path. It was still steep, but it was the only approach that could be exploited. Silva ordered the construction of a siege ramp. Day after day, Jewish slaves, captives forced to work against their own people, hauled stone and earth. The ramp grew, a scar on the desert floor. Slowly, painfully, it crept upward toward the walls of Masada. From above, the rebels watched in horror. Their arrows flew, their slings cracked, but the Romans shielded their workers with wooden towers and walls. Every stone placed was another step closer to doom. Imagine standing atop that fortress, day after day, watching your enemy build a mountain to reach you. Every sunrise brought the ramp higher. Every sunset reminded you that time was running out. And yet, the Sicarii refused to surrender. To them, surrender was worse than death. Weeks turned into months. The rebels grew restless. Some argued they should attack the Romans below in daring night raids. Others urged patience. Eleazar reminded them of Jerusalem, how surrender had brought only slavery and chains. But whispers spread through the fortress. Mothers feared for their children. Husbands questioned whether their leader's defiance would doom them all. At night, the desert winds carried the sounds of Roman soldiers drinking, laughing, singing around their campfires. The contrast was unbearable. Down below, the empire feasted. Up above, the rebels wondered when the end would come. Still, Eleazar preached resistance. "We are not mere men," he told them. "We are the last guardians of freedom. If we fall, our children will grow up as slaves, our wives as spoils of war. But if we stand, even in death, our names will live." These words struck fire into weary hearts. The rebels prepared themselves not just for battle, but for destiny. The ramp was finished. A massive wooden siege tower, armored with iron plates, rolled up its slope. Inside, a great battering ram swung back and forth, ready to smash the walls of Masada. From above, the rebels hurled stones, shot arrows, launched flaming torches. But the Romans were ready. Shields locked, formations advanced, and the ram struck the walls with thunderous force. Day after day, the pounding continued. Cracks spiderwebbed across the fortress walls. Dust rained down in the streets. Children cried. Women prayed. The defenders knew the end was near. Finally, with one last shattering blow, a breach opened. The Romans had torn through. Victory was theirs. But when Silva ordered his men forward, silence. Inside the fortress, no defenders rushed to meet them. No ambush awaited. Only eerie stillness. As Roman soldiers advanced cautiously, torches in hand, they discovered the truth. Nearly 1,000 bodies lay scattered in the halls, in the courtyards, in the homes of Masada. Men, women, children, all dead. The Sicarii had chosen their own fate. Rather than fall into Roman hands, they had performed a grim ritual. Each man killed his wife and children. Then, by lot, 10 men were chosen to slay the rest. Of those 10, one was chosen to kill the final 9. Alone, he fell upon his sword. When Rome entered Masada, they found not a triumph, but a tomb. The shock rippled through the legion. Victory felt hollow. For the Sicarii, it was the ultimate act of defiance. Rome could take their lives, but never their freedom. Masada fell. The great revolt was truly over. The Jewish people were scattered, enslaved, and silenced beneath Rome's rule. But the story of Masada refused to die. For centuries, it lingered like a ghost, half history, half legend. Was Eleazar's speech recorded accurately? Did nearly 1,000 really perish by their own hand? Or was it a story shaped by Josephus, the historian who wrote it down? Historians still debate. But truth or legend, the tale of Masada endures. Today, the ruins remain. Visitors climb the steep paths or ride cable cars to the top. They walk through crumbling walls, gaze into the desert below, and imagine the final night when fire lit the sky and voices echoed prayers of freedom. For modern Israel, Masada became a symbol, a reminder that freedom must be defended at any cost. Soldiers once swore oaths atop the fortress. Masada shall not fall again. And for the rest of us, the story forces a haunting question. What would you choose if faced with the same impossible fate? Masada is not just a ruin. It's a mirror, reflecting the deepest human struggle between survival, freedom, and dignity. If the story moved you, if it made you think about the price of defiance and the weight of freedom, then let's keep it alive. Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more forgotten tales of history, and join us again as we uncover the stories that shaped our world. Because history isn't just about the past. It's about us, right now.